When did you get multiple sclerosis? I'm not asking when you were diagnosed. I'm asking when your immune system started to attack your brain. It's so common to say, I was diagnosed on this day, but I had symptoms long before then. So who knows when MS really started? Well, according to a recent study, it may have been even earlier than those first symptoms. Research suggests that your brain shrinks 5 years before the first symptoms appear. And for many of us, we don't get an official diagnosis until years after the symptoms even start. So the time frame from when your immune system starts to attack your brain to an official diagnosis could be up to a decade. That's disturbing, but unfortunately not surprising based on many of our experiences. Now, if you're listening to this podcast, you may be thinking, that's interesting, but I already know I have MS, so how is this relevant for me today? That's exactly what I'm sharing and answering. So let's get started. And my fellow MS sisters, if you want a more personalized approach to creating your MS diet and lifestyle, check out my private coaching program. It includes a comprehensive assessment, personalized strategies, and lifestyle support. Each month, I only accept 3 new clients. So if you're interested, apply now at alenebrennan.com/coach. Now on to today's episode. There are 1 million people diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in the US. So that makes you 1 in a million. And you have a special purpose in this world that no diagnosis can take away from you. So if you are ready to reclaim your body, mind, and life from multiple sclerosis, welcome to my MS podcast. I'm your host, Alene Brennan. Hearing that our brain starts shrinking up to 5 years before first symptoms appear is alarming and discouraging. It's like discovering you had a balance on your credit card that you thought was paid off. Nobody wants to hear that their brain is shrinking. And what does that even mean? How does it affect you? Well, it's common with multiple sclerosis. Lucky us, right? Prior to my MS diagnosis, I never thought about my brain shrinking. But when I started hearing about it, my first question was, why does the brain shrink, especially for those of us with MS? So that's where I'm starting with us today, because I personally like to understand the whys of things so that it just helps me have a better understanding and be a more empowered patient. It turns out there are several reasons why our brain may shrink with multiple sclerosis. Neurodegeneration being one of them. MS is considered both an inflammatory and a neurodegenerative disease. Neurodegeneration is basically the process of loss of nerve cells and their connections. So over time, the cumulative loss of neurons and axons can cause the brain to shrink or atrophy. Another reason the brain may shrink with MS is repeated cycles of demyelination, the loss of myelin, and remyelination, the recovery of myelin. It can disrupt the normal structure and function of the brain. This ongoing process can contribute to tissue damage and atrophy. And then, of course, there's just good old aging that it can affect our brain. Now, normal aging is associated with some degree of atrophy. So add MS into the mix, and this experience can accelerate the brain volume loss compared to healthy individuals. So neurodegeneration, demyelination, age factors, and then there's also the presence of lesions or plaques in the brain that can also influence the rate of brain atrophy in MS. And the larger the lesions are and the more lesions you have can often correlate with more significant brain volume loss. So I guess the answer to my question of why the brain shrinks with MS is for many reasons. Now, it's important to remember that not everyone with MS will experience the same degree of brain shrinkage. The rate of atrophy can vary widely. The extent of the brain atrophy is influenced by factors such as the type of MS a person has. So if it's primary progressive, secondary progressive, those are often associated with more pronounced atrophy over time compared to somebody with relapsing remitting. Disease duration can also make a difference. So the brain atrophy tends to progress more as the duration of the disease increases. So the longer somebody has MS, the more likely you are to experience that. Individuals who have had MS for a longer period of time may have more significant brain volume loss. And the age of your diagnosis can impact the baseline brain volume. Older individuals with MS may already have some age-related brain volume loss, making it challenging to differentiate between MS-related atrophy. And then, of course, there's the disease activity. So frequent relapses, active inflammation in the central nervous system can contribute to more rapid brain atrophy. Effective disease-modifying treatments that reduce inflammation may slow down the rate of brain volume loss. I wonder how many times I'm saying brain volume loss on this podcast episode. I find it interesting, though, to learn all about this. It's just, we can know that MS is the body's own immune system attacking the central nervous system, and it attacks the myelin sheath, the protective coating around our nerve fibers, and that can create lesions, which can slow down the communication from the brain to the rest of the body. Like, we know the basics, but I like peeling back the layers and understanding different nuances or different aspects of MS, because to me, it helps me understand better what's going on in my specific body, which is so important. But it also helps me, I guess I would say, be more committed to my healthy habits, because I know personally, but I know this is true for you guys too, because I hear from so many of you, when you start to feel a little bit better, you may start to slip on some of your healthy habits, because you start to think, well, maybe I don't actually have to do all of that, right? But then in time, we start to not feel good again. Like the fatigue may start to slip in again. Your digestion may not feel as great. You may feel more constipation. Brain fog may slip in, and it can be so subtle. And you look back and you realize that one decision that you made last week, last month, last year of starting to compromise then compounded and eventually got you back to square one. So when I understand these things of what's happening beyond the lesions, like what's happening to my brain, and then I'm going to get into how that affects our experience with MS, it just, I guess it just helps me to feel more committed to my healthy habits, because I know what's at stake. And living with an invisible disease, it's very easy to have those moments where you think, well, maybe that's not going to be the case for me. Maybe I actually don't have MS. Has anyone ever thought that? Oh, that would be a dream come true. But this helps me to better understand what's going on in my body, even if it's a silent action that's happening. Okay, so let me get back to this list here. So the things that can influence brain atrophy, like I said, the type of MS, disease duration, age of your diagnosis, disease activity, and then of course there's also individual variability. Every person's MS experience is unique. Some of us may have a more aggressive form of the disease with faster brain atrophy, while others may experience a more mild course. There's treatment response. So the response to disease-modifying therapies can impact brain atrophy. Some disease-modifying therapies are more effective at slowing the disease progression and brain volume loss than others. Genetic factors can influence disease severity and the rate of brain atrophy as well. Some genetic markers are associated with higher risk of brain volume loss. And then last but not least, there's overall health. So lifestyle factors such as diet, exercise, stress management, sleep quality can all play a role in brain health and atrophy. Let me say that one more time. Overall health can play a role in brain health and atrophy. That includes lifestyle factors such as diet, exercise, stress management, and sleep quality. My friends, the food that we eat can impact brain atrophy. Managing stress can impact brain atrophy. Your quality of sleep, your form of exercise. This is really empowering. Again, I just go back to what I just shared, that learning about this, hearing about this makes me excited to do these things, to follow these healthy habits, because it's not just about like, oh, I can't have this food or I shouldn't have this food. This is about empowering ourselves to look at this and being like, no, I'm not eating that. I'm choosing this over that because I don't want my brain to shrink any sooner than it's already going to. Okay, can you tell I get excited about this stuff? So the next question is, how does brain shrinkage affect us? It can have several effects on us, both in terms of symptoms and overall health. So I have another list for us here. I'm going to run through, which, by the way, I know a lot of the things I'm sharing today are kind of like in list form. If you're more of a visual person, I know I very much am. I always include, I guess, what you would consider my show notes on my website. So you can always head over to alenebrennan.com and just click on the blog link or go to alenebrennan.com/blog, and you will see the show notes for each and every episode. So if you ever wanted to print one out, or read it, just have another resource of it, you can definitely check out all the episode show notes at alenebrennan.com. Okay, so getting back here, how does brain shrinkage affect us? Like I said, there are several ways, both in terms of symptoms and overall health. First, cognitive function. If you saw my Instagram post the other day, I shared that up to 50% of those of us living with MS will experience an impact in cognitive function. What does that mean? We can experience difficulties with memory, attention, problem solving, and processing speed. These cognitive changes can affect daily activities and quality of life. This is one of the reasons why I love getting together in community and talking about this, because it's one of those moments where it's like, yes, I experienced that too. And when I try to tell the average person that, they hear it and they're just like, oh my goodness, I'm so forgetful as well. I always forget people's names too. Yes, that may be true, but if you jog your memory or, you kind of help yourself along, you'll think of it pretty quickly, and it tends to be more of a one-off experience. Whereas for those of us living with MS, this can be something that is experienced on an ongoing basis. So when the brain shrinks, one of the ways it can affect us is cognitive function. Another way is physical disability. So it can lead to a decline in motor skills, coordination, and balance. Obviously, this can increase our risk for falls and other mobility issues. Disease progression is another way that brain shrinkage can affect us. The extent of brain atrophy is often associated with disease progression. As the brain loses tissue, it can become less effective at compensating for MS-related damage. This can lead to increased disability over time. Brain atrophy can also exacerbate MS symptoms. We may experience more severe or frequent relapses, which can lead to an increase in disability and symptom burden. There's also the emotional and psychological impact of brain atrophy, which can take quite an emotional toll on somebody. We can experience increased stress, anxiety, depression, and a sense of deep frustration as symptoms worsen. Now, I know that's another statistic that I see so often, that those of us living with MS are at a higher risk for experiencing anxiety and depression. And I think that that's relevant just by the sheer nature of MS being invisible, being unpredictable. That can be very isolating. But then hearing that the shrinkage of the brain can also impact this, it feels like it's just a layered impact then. Which, by the way, as a side note, one of the things that we can do to counteract this, which I will share in just a moment, but I'm going to add it in here as well because I think it's relevant to make these connections, This is why it's so important for us to have social connections. This is why it's so important for us to prioritize friendships and getting together with people. And I know, just because I've had conversations with many of you just this week, as a matter of fact, who were sharing how you start to worry about those invites kind of coming in less and less frequent because you may have to cancel because of fatigue, or you may feel self-conscious about going into social environments because you can't get the words out the way that you used to, or somebody comes up and starts talking about something that they told you before that was a pretty significant event in their life and you don't remember any of it. So that can make you feel self-conscious. That can make you hesitant to show up for social events. But my friends, we need to maintain social connections. It can look different. You can choose how you want that to look in your life, but they are so, so important. We kind of have a lot stacked against us when it comes to the emotional side of living with an invisible, unpredictable, incurable disease. I know I'm just a ray of sunshine today, but I want to share the facts because I want us to hear the importance of this message. We need to have social connections. It is important to our overall well-being, and it's important to our emotional and mental health. Okay, I'm going to get off that soapbox for a second here, but don't worry because I'm going to pick it back up in just a moment. So back on our list here of things that can, how brain shrinkage can affect us. So I shared cognitive function, physical disability, disease progression, symptom severity, and then I just left off with the emotional and psychological impact. Next would be treatment response. MS atrophy can affect how individuals respond to MS treatments. Those with more extensive brain atrophy may be less responsive to disease-modifying therapies, and treatment decisions may need to be adjusted accordingly. So there's a big motivator for, I'll just say for me, if I know that I can influence in any way this rate at which my brain is shrinking through diet, lifestyle, sleep, stress management, exercise, and by doing so, it can position me to make disease-modifying therapies more effective, even if it's by 1%. I'm making that up, but even if it is that small, that's worth it to me. And that's one of the things where I think it's so important for us to not be so hung up on the fact that whether food does or doesn't, quote unquote, cure MS. Personally, I don't believe that it cures it, but I believe that it will dramatically change our experience living with this disease because it can help us to feel better in our body, help us to experience just a little less brain fog and fatigue. But if it can also position us, like I said, even if it's the slightest edge advantage, it's worth it to know that we could possibly make the disease modifying therapies, should you choose to take one, even just a little bit more effective. It's worth it. And then lastly, quality of life. Overall brain atrophy can have a significant impact on quality of life for us living with MS. It can limit the ability to work, to engage in social activities, and to maintain independence. So I don't know about you, but this list has me motivated. We can look at this as super depressing, or we can look at this as something that is propelling us to take action, to start taking our diet seriously, to start prioritizing sleep a little bit better, and the Netflix binge just a little bit earlier so that you can go up to bed and get a good night's sleep. Now, of course, we have to remember it's hard to make broad statements when it comes to anything about MS, but certainly with brain atrophy, that is no exception. It's complex. So clearly, as you can hear me sharing all these factors, we need to keep in mind that everyone with MS has a unique experience, and therefore everyone's impact and rate of brain atrophy is going to be slightly different. So please know that as I share these things today, these are generalized statements, which are really hard to make when it comes to MS and specifically brain atrophy. Okay, my next question, because I got many of them, how do I manage this? And I kind of gave a little teaser and spoiler alert for it earlier as we were talking about what impacts it. But I want to dive into some more tangible, very practical ways in which I can manage this. We know when it comes to managing brain atrophy in MS, it often involves strategies to reduce inflammation, protect nerve cells, and promote overall brain health. So while it's challenging to completely prevent and reverse brain atrophy, there are some practical steps and strategies that we can take to slow down the progression of brain shrinkage and promote brain health. Now, obviously, we want to be working with our doctors on this, but here are just some basic practical things that you can do. First, disease modifying therapies, should you choose to take them, they can be helpful to reduce inflammation and slow disease progression, potentially preserving brain tissue. Having regular MRIs can be really helpful to enable your doctor to track changes in brain volume and lesion activity and then adjust your treatments accordingly. Next up, a healthy diet. Ding, 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 ding. One of my personal favorites, food. Following an anti-inflammatory diet that's rich in antioxidants, omega-3 fatty acids, and a variety of fruits and vegetables can support brain health and overall well-being. My friends, we eat 3 times a day, most of us, and this is an opportunity to fuel your body with the nutrients that it needs to support its health and maintain good brain health. And I always like to give a little plug and a reminder that it doesn't need to be a complete overhaul. Is that really effective, and will you get most results faster from that approach? Yes, but that's not always the most sustainable. As a nutrition coach, I find most people to be most successful when it comes to dietary changes, when they make them gradually, when they feel like they are one by one making new changes that are more sustainable, and it just becomes their new normal. We mentioned exercise before, and not only that can that help overall brain health, but it can also help to improve mood and cognitive function. And then stress management. Again, mentioned that one before. Chronic stress can exacerbate MS symptoms and contribute to brain atrophy. So practicing stress management techniques such as mindfulness, meditation, deep breathing exercises, and yoga can all be really helpful. I keep adding in little side notes here, but I think it's helpful just to realize that stress management doesn't have to be a daily 40-minute meditation. It can be a single deep breath that you're taking throughout your day. It can be 5 minutes of stretching at the end of the day, even if it's during commercial break of a favorite show. My point is that stress management doesn't have to be unattainable. It's more often the things that are most effective are the small things that you're incorporating throughout your day. So if you take just a few deep intentional breaths throughout your day, that can be a really helpful start. I also mentioned sleep earlier, so poor sleep quality can impact cognitive function and overall health. So prioritizing a good night's sleep and practicing good sleep hygiene is really helpful to your overall health and specifically your brain health. Your body also heals while you sleep. So if you're not getting adequate sleep, you are missing out on really valuable and high quality healing time in your body. Cognitive training. Oh, this is a fun one. So there are different exercises that you can do that challenge your brain that will help you to maintain and improve cognitive functions. This is where, activities like puzzles and word games and all kinds of different things. There are board games, there's different apps that you can do, there's online programs, but they may seem silly and you might be quick to dismiss them, but give them a try because they can have a really helpful impact on you maintaining cognitive function. I also mentioned social connections, staying socially active. So this can look a lot of different ways. So decide how you want it to look for you, but it's important to stay socially active. It can have a positive impact on mood and cognitive function. And we know that studies show that those experiencing loneliness have a higher rate of disease activity. I don't think that that's just with MS. I'm pretty sure that that is overall different health conditions, but loneliness is definitely connected with I'll say poor health. So let's get social and let's give our health a nice little boost. And I'm going to say it again. Remember that how we manage MS is highly individualized. What works for one person may not work for another. That's why I'm so passionate about empowering us to be health advocates for ourselves and to take action. We don't want to put all the power in somebody else's hands to give us one solution. I'm suggesting this in the terms of working with a doctor who may prescribe disease-modifying therapies. That is one really valuable asset for us to manage MS. But it's not the only thing. It is on us. It's on us to raise our hands and say, yes, I am going to play an active role because I want to feel my best and I want to get the most out of this life that I am given. I would never have chosen MS, but it's here. So I am going to do my best to make sure that I feel my best in my body and that I am best positioned to still do all the things that I want to do in this world. So that's all the things that we talked about of choosing a good high quality diet, managing stress, practicing appropriate level of exercise, getting good quality sleep, doing all of those brain exercises, and it's so much more. And the last thing I'll share here is that I feel like this study really highlights the importance of us taking action now. We can't wait. We can't look at this and be disillusioned by the invisibility of this disease, or even more so, the unpredictability of it. Like if we go for a stretch of feeling really well, that's amazing. And I'm so happy for each of us when we experience that. I hope it lasts as long as it possibly can. But we can't be disillusioned by that to think that MS is not happening in our body then. We need to get out of bed every single day and do our best to manage our health. This is not about being perfect, but it's just showing up and doing your best each day. So maybe today that's having one serving of vegetables at dinner tonight. Or maybe it means that you're going to get to bed a half an hour earlier than you normally do because you know that you want to get better quality of sleep and you just haven't been prioritizing it. Or maybe it means that you're scheduling your MRI because you've been putting that off and you know that you want to get it done. So today's going to be the day that you do that. My friends, we don't have to make monumental overhauls each and every day, but we do need to take one step forward each and every day. This is your health. This is your life. And I want to help you get the most out of it. This is about reclaiming your body, mind, and life from MS. Well, my friend, we've reached the end of this episode. Pick one lesson from today's discussion and put it into action now. It's time to reclaim your body, mind, and life from multiple sclerosis. And for more resources, events, and programs, head over to alenebrennan.com. See you on the next episode of my MS podcast.